So about 15 to 20 years ago, there was a company called In-Situ, and they developed a vehicle called ScanEagle. It's a UAS about arm's length across, and it carries a forward-looking infrared camera on it. That it flies fairly high. It flies at about anywhere from 10 to 15,000 feet, and it has the forward-looking infrared camera and a regular camera on it, and it's able to zoom in very, very clearly. When I got a chance to fly this, it was at Tyndall Air Force Base. We were doing a bunch of flights from Tyndall Air Force Base to Eglin Air Force Base, and it performed well. It lands with a tether, so there's a flagpole essentially that you put up with a string that goes up on it, and the wing has a hook on the end, and so it actually hooks that. It comes in and hooks the tether. So anyway, that was developed by a small company called In-Situ, very small company, about 20 to 30 people, who was then bought by Boeing. And so the ScanEagle is now operated on a regular basis for the military by Boeing or In-Situ, which is now managed as a small company within Boeing. This gives you an idea of a typical agricultural UAS mission, and it also gives you an idea of about 10 years ago what I was doing. Here we have Phytophthora infestans. I haven't said that in 10 years. This is potato blight. Potato fields are susceptible to potato blight. It's a type of fungus that infects one field, it releases spores, and it travels to another field. So we got access to a 2,000-acre research farm. We planted a plot of potatoes. We infected the crop, and then the neighboring crop. And don't worry, this was a farm where they were doing all sorts of genetically modified crops that you wouldn't want to eat anyway. So it's not like we were hurting old Farmer Joe. And then we flew this vehicle around with Petri dishes on it. Now this is a homemade RC vehicle with, again, about a $50,000 autopilot on it. And we flew the Petri dishes around, and we took them back to the lab and cultured them, and we looked at how those were spread. So that was actually very well received. The algorithms for how we would fly and understand how we would fly and make sure we covered the right areas and maybe do that with multiple vehicles for what was of the most academic interest. There are a lot of other ideas that are being kicked around. Medical service is one. This right now is a concept. Somebody has built a vehicle and attached a defibrillator to it. That's never actually been used. But this right now is a concept where somebody who's suffering a medical emergency in Germany alone, where this idea was first presented, there are over 100,000 cardiac deaths. A lot of those could be prevented if we had rapid access to a defibrillator. So in this concept, we have a flying defibrillator, which is not that difficult to build from an electrical engineering and systems perspective. The person has an app on their phone, and they radio in. The trauma operator can see and speak to the end user, who's assisting, in this case, her father, a victim. She attaches the paddles to her father, and she backs away, clears off, and it revives. So cardiac arrhythmia, irregular heartbeat is what this would be used to treat. So in theory, this would be a great application of UAS, where now we have automated external defibrillators that don't require a trained human, or don't require a trained user to operate. But that might be a really great usage, because the faster we can get to the cardiac health, the better. So that's not something that's been demonstrated ever. Right now it's an idea in Alex. Alex is a student who, just like you, who could go on to build one of these. A lot of my work derives from biological systems, derives inspiration from biological systems. Things like the hummingbird. Now this is actually slowed down and repeated, just to show you that there's a lot of active feedback going on for that hummingbird to do a lot of gaze stabilization. So this is video that a colleague of mine, Robert Dudley, shot, just to show that in hummingbirds, a vertebrate animal, there's a lot of active feedback going on, which is not too surprising. We know that they have a lot of neural material, and so the fact that there's a lot of active feedback going on is not too surprising. What might be a little more surprising, these videos are big, is that on insects we see similar structures. So the way an insect is physically built and assembled, it has this split between the way it actuates. So it has power muscles and it has steering muscles. You guys can still see, right?
You can see the other one.
Okay. So it has power muscles and it has steering muscles. And a given insect flaps its wings at, say this is a fruit fly, it flaps its wings at about 200 hertz. It takes it, according to our studies, about 3 to 4 milliseconds to fire a single neuron, which means that in one wing stroke, it can fire about a neuron and a half, unless it's firing them in parallel. And so the way in which the insects achieve flight control is very interesting because it has to be done in a way that has very low computational requirements. And their body and their neural systems are set up to take advantage of it. So their body has power muscles that generate these gross wing stroke motions, just simple wing stroke motions, and it has steering muscles that act like transmission or steering gears to change those and perturb those wing strokes so that they can affect flight control. And the way their feedback paths, the neural feedback paths, we see very direct short paths that go through. So in a lot of cases, their flight control is more of a flight stabilization reflex, where we have less than 10 neurons in the path, and that allows us to have very fast reflexes, very fast flight control, but it's not doing a lot of intelligent behavior. So the last few years, one of the things I've worked on is what can we learn from these insects, and how can we transition it down to smaller and smaller vehicles. So we observe in the lab, and I'll show you a couple of videos, that insects are very maneuverable. And as we start miniaturizing different vehicles, the top one, that's a quarter, that's a UMD microflap I'll show you a little bit on. The middle sized one is a project out of another university that uses piezoelectric materials to achieve a similar flapping structure. And then the smaller one is a very small vehicle. So what can we learn? So the first thing we start with in a basic science environment is three videos, three orthogonally mounted videos. We've got a top view, a front view, a side view, and we've developed some computer code that allows us to track the 3D position and orientation of this insect and its wing motion. And so that's a really great data source that we can start to parse through and mine. We can start to do all sorts of things to confuse the insect. So maybe we play a video of a predator and we watch it run away, or maybe we introduce a wind gust into the chamber and watch how it reacts to that. And we can start to study all the sorts of reflexes that it has. So once we study those biological systems, the question might be, okay, well, how would we implement this on a small scale? So if we had to build a vehicle that separated power and steering in its actuation and used vehicle, used neural feedback, how would we do that? And so this project involved a lot of different technologies. One of them was the development of an autopilot that could fit on a vehicle that small. So we had about a gram of payload to work with here to build a flight controller. And the smallest possible flight controller hardware that we could find was 1.65 grams. Believe it or not, that half or 3/4 of a broke our weight limit. And so we actually had to build a smaller flight controller, which is about 3/4 of a gram, and it's something that we can fly. So it's got a processor on it, it's got a radio on it, it's got servos, actuators, the same sorts of things that you'll see on the quadros that we brought to fly for you today. And so, we can build that, we can put it on a test stand, and we can flap it up, and we can see that we have control authority over all three different apps, right? So this is still a work in progress, and it'll be a little bit of time before we have it flying autonomously, partly because of some development issues with developing that code. So there are plenty of issues that we need folks to work on. Probably the biggest one on this is that we are able to yaw at about 600 degrees per second. We're able to pitch at 125 degrees per second. We're able to roll about 250 degrees per second. And those really should be about reverse, because pitch is what we need the most control authority over. Yaw is almost massively stable on its own. So here you see that we're looking at input commands and the output. So we can generate motion on all three different axes. Those measurements were made indoors in a lab using the Vicon motion tracking system. This is something we have actually several at this university, so that's a fantastic opportunity. It's the same motion tracking system that is used in a lot of big budget films. If you've ever seen the behind the scenes for something like Avatar, and you see somebody with little gray dots all over their face, and then the computer digitizes their face motion, or maybe you see them in a suit, kind of like a bodysuit with dots all over them, and they're moving like that. Probably the first time that people started to use techniques like this was for the Matrix, the movie The Matrix. We use those same techniques. In the lab to digitize the position and the motion of our vehicles, so that we can get really, really great data on them. That allows us to do mathematical models for how these vehicles fly. So this is a small quadrotor, about less than the size of your hand, that we developed in our lab. It's developed as a printed circuit board. So there's no real assembly in this. You buy a printed circuit board, and it's built. You plug in the battery, put on the propellers, and you have your vehicle. And so we put a flight controller on it, and we went ahead and digitized the motion, and we were able to actually back out experimentally the dynamics of that vehicle. So the ability to back out experimentally a model that describes a vehicle is very, very powerful, because it allows us to understand what that vehicle is capable of, and to design flight controllers for those sorts of vehicles. I said before that we need all sorts of different types of specialties to work on this. This is the BAMS, the RQ4N UAS BAMS. It's actually operated locally. It stands for Broad Area Maritime Surveillance, and that program, which is now called Triton, although there's some offshoots as well, is operated at Patuxent River Naval Air Station, about 2 hours drive south for here. So it's a local Maryland operation. And the idea behind this vehicle was, can we take effectively Global Hawk and have some maritime surveillance capability? Basically go look up and down the shore, the Maryland shore, and understand what are shipping vehicles, what are pleasure vehicles, what are potentially road vehicles or military vehicles. So you'll see in the front end, this vehicle is dominated by the satellite radome. So there's a satellite dish up there. This vehicle is powered by a Rolls-Royce engine. I worked at GE Aircraft Engines for a little while. There's a competitor to Rolls-Royce, and the skill sets that you need there. You need mechanical engineers to design all the parts. So there's materials analysis in all the parts. These are high temperature alloys. Inconel is a big one that's used. You need people who can model flames to do flame fronts in the combustion, because you want to make sure that all of the components burn efficiently and burn fully. You need controls folks to map the fully automated digital electronic control, the FADEC controller on there. You need electrical engineers to actually put that into hardware, and computer engineers to understand how we can look for faults in this, because we don't want that controller to fail. The vehicle, the wings in this vehicle are built by, I believe, Aurora Flight Sciences. They're composite wing skins. Aurora Flight Sciences is a relatively small company, about 500 people, and they build all the wing skins for these. So structural dynamics and composites, which is an area that's still under active research. So there are a whole lot of specialties that I haven't even mentioned here. AUVSI, Association for Unmanned Vehicle System International, did a estimate of all the different jobs that would be created. Here are a number of them. They pay well. These are actually trade jobs. So the engineers were employed even before they got to us. But the idea is that there are a lot of jobs that are coming out for when you graduate. You're freshmen, so there are a few years before you have to worry about that. One of the things you may be interested in during the time that you're here is the UAS test site. Maryland has a UAS test site, believe it or not. It is one of 6 test sites in the U.S. The FAA has designated 6 test sites in the U.S. that will do UAS testing. And that's really important, because as a public institution or a commercial institution, most places are not allowed to fly drones. We're just not allowed to fly these vehicles outdoors. So the fact that the FAA has said, here are 6 places where you can fly is really, really powerful. And in fact, as part of that, they wrote actually a certificate of waiver or authorization which says you are allowed to deviate from that rule as long as you're following certain rules and you're self-certifying. And so we have a process internally at the university to figure out, one, when a student like you has invented a new vehicle, how we can get it out to the test site, we can fly it, and we can get that tested. It's under construction. I think it's scheduled to be done in October, November, but we've been flying for, I think, over a year. So there are flights that go on a regular basis, and we've got access to water, to maritime areas. We've got access to some farms and a lot of different sites. So there are some possibilities there. There are a lot of projects at UMD that are migrating out there, and I won't go through all the details in those. We can talk about those individually. What I will say is that the UAS test site started an internship program. This summer was the first time that we've done it. I'll just give you an idea of a couple of the projects that people have worked on. There were 5 test site interns this summer. One of the students was looking at what are the sounds that these UASs make. What are the acoustic representations of these vehicles? Can we understand how that spreads? Can we understand what that sound is like? How is it different from something else, from a helicopter? We had another student who was looking at the performance capabilities. How do these vehicles perform differently? When I put different payloads on them. We had another student who actually a couple of students who flew some agricultural surveys, and they stitched together gigapixel images of a farmer's crop. He was ecstatic to see that because it allowed him to estimate, this is a sod field, it allowed him to estimate how much of return he was going to get on that crop that year. We had some other students that flew search and rescue missions. There's actually a swimmer in these vehicles, in these pictures, so one of our students actually swam out there. We had a kayak on board, on standby, and a rescue swimmer, so we did it all safely, but just a look for search and rescue. Potomac, there are between 40 and 50 search and rescues for missing kayakers on the Potomac every year. So this is an application where we need a solution. Currently, we look for them with a manned helicopter, which is a lot more expensive than operating a UAS. One of the students who's actually going to demonstrate for you today was involved with the system identification. Now, how can we extract a model from captured flight test data? So she's actually here, and she'll fly a vehicle, and Katie will answer some questions about her experience at the test site if you're interested. With that, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Katie and Josh give you a flight demonstration of some of these vehicles. I think they've got a couple of things queued up. Do I need a YouTube link for you?
Yeah.
Oh, I saw someone selling those at one of them at a mall.
It's not working here, so we have to use this one here.
This is the link.
Okay. Well, would you like to
I am Katie. I was one of the first interns this summer at the UAS test site. There was 5 of us, and it was a great time. I'm a junior aerospace student this year, but I was a sophomore last year. It's a good time.
G.
I understand you're all undecided, so pick engineering.
No, G, J,
You get to play with fun toys
V,
sometimes.
K, K, U, S, sorry, capital S, V.
He missed the delays.
There we go.
It's like 25 seconds off.
So this is an example of an DJI same sort of thing that we use at the test site. So Katie's been involved in building the design for how this operation is done.
What? Close up to the game? Is that it? Or anything more?
Well, while he's playing that, are there any questions for myself or Design?
What? Oh, yeah. So, hi, I'm Josh. I'm a, now that we can actually hear each other, I'm a sophomore mechanical engineer. I'm involved in the UAS team, which competes in the student UAS competition, also hosted by EAVSI every year. I was a part of a counter UAV internship through the Aero department over the summer. I'm an RC pilot, so I fly for a lot of different groups, working on flying for more. But, yeah.
That's what I had. Good. Any questions for Dr. Farouk or Josh or Katie? So Katie, you are a junior now. Josh, you are a sophomore now. So he was not just going to sit in your shoes exactly last year, but he was a freshman like all of you. He did an internship working on UAVs, and so did Katie, but separate projects. So this is the kind of thing that you can actually do as a rising sophomore next year, and get to learn how to fly a quadcopter. I don't think Katie knew how to fly a quadcopter before, am I correct?
Correct.
And so she learned a lot this past summer and made a lot of good contributions to system identification of a system like that, so that she could actually develop a dynamic model and then use that model for simulation and control. And Josh just can't help himself. He's a RC pilot and loves to fly little airplanes.
So
not
if-
to fly over people's heads.
This one weighs less than a sheet of paper. You're gonna crush it with your hand before it does any damage to you.
How much does that weigh?
3.5 grams.
That's impressive.
And this is actually from 6 years ago. I think the record for smallest 2-channel control, at least at the RC hobbyist groups, is like 0.5 gram for something like this now. So, whoops. It's the battery's held on with magnets, so if I push the throttle too far, it'll actually pop the battery off for a second, and it has to reconnect. Sometimes it goes through the full reboot sequence, in which case it just glides into the wall.
Does that usually, make it inoperable?
No, it's well, I mean, you know, kinetic energy is, you know, a function of mass and velocity, and this thing has such little mass that it just doesn't have enough energy to break itself. So. What? Like 0.5 gram. What?
It's a pager motor.
Yeah, it's just a little pager motor with a little gearbox and a single actuator on the yaw. It's fairly simple.
It's a great example of how we steal a lot from mobile phone technologies. The processors, the sensors, in this case the pager motor, so the vibrating motor in your cell phone is what powers this, and the battery technology. I think that concludes our demonstration.
How long did it
There it goes. Oh. Well done.
How long did it fly for?
7 minutes, something like that.
Well done. I didn't know you could actually connect to the YouTube video in almost real time.
Yeah, so
That's pretty cool. Is that an app?
yeah,
No,
this is
it's
the
right on the DJI app that they've
Oh,
what
developed.
what they
DJI
do.
has done is they've done ground stations
Right.
on phones so that
Right.
everyone has their ground station with them.
Oh,
and
that's
they
pretty
they
cool.
just added that. So yeah.
So everyone can
today's the
have
first
the
day
app?
we used it.
Is that right? So everyone can have the app on their phone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Only iPhone.
On iPhone?
Yeah,
No,
this
Android?
one's
Well,
like-
you can view it from any
Oh,
device
anywhere.
that
Yeah,
connects
yeah,
to
yeah,
YouTube.
yeah.
But I think you can actually set this up.
But that's being sent by Bluetooth wireless? too?
It's all Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi.
It's all Wi-fi.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all 2.4, 5.8, somewhere in there.
That's pretty impressive. Really impressive.
I just grabbed this at the last minute.
Yeah, that was the wow factor.
That's a good way to sell it.
That's a good way. Yeah, great
A few
job.
more of those.
Yeah.
I don't know that you can get these things anymore.
Where'd you get them from?
Plantraco is the company.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if they're still in business.
I think I've got a couple. No, I get Plantraco orders a lot.
Oh, you get Plantraco? Okay, yeah.
Oh, sure.
I just haven't heard anything from them in a while.
I think the gentleman before you from California.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to try and buy it, you can.
These aren't.
Yeah, one thing about these guys is that the acoustic signature is for an indoor environment, it's too loud, almost. And this is,
why I grabbed
that was perfect.
Awesome.
Just that it can't carry anything.
Yeah.
Very, very little things.
Right. So is that like a shape memory alloy? Or is that just
No,
a guide
that's
wire?
actually just thread.
Just thread? Whoa.
Cotton thread.
Wow.
So you can see they've used, it's just a loop
Mhm.
of carbon fiber.
Yep.
And then they have 2 ribs, and the undersides of the ribs are held on with more of just the little thread, and then the tips are bent up. So it's this
Wow.
kind of, what do they call that in math? The saddle shape.
Yeah.
That's essentially what they're forming here, just with a few more variations. to the
Right.
shape. And then this is like 10 times thinner than saran wrap even.
Right. Is it really?
That's what they've coated it with, yeah.
Nice.
If you went like this, your finger would just go straight through
that
with
right?
no resistance. But,
How did they figure out that that was the right aerodynamic shape to get some reasonable lift?
well,
It's elliptical airfoil in a sense.
Once your cord is below 3
Yeah,
It
it's
doesn't
just-
really
it
matter.
doesn't
It's very
yeah.
small. No, but they still rounded the edges.
That's more of a function of the actual
Structure.
carbon fiber.
The carbon fiber.
Like that shape comes out as a necessity of making something roughly oblong out of a single.
So is that your only vehicle you have? You have other versions of that?
This is the only one of this scale I have. I have everything from planes starting about this
Yeah.
big up to I think my largest.
But this is your smallest one.
This is my smallest one by far.
You know, you've got the
What's
little
on the
wind
back
tunnel up
rudder?
there.
The back.
That's
Right.
a little coil with magnet in the middle. Yeah,
That'd be easy.
Is that how it turns?
that's how it turns.
Actually, no.
Yeah,
I don't
so
know, it's too
the
strong.
At the,
wires
this
that are
range
actually
number,
pasted
Yeah.
down this tube, and then it
I
just
think it's full.
pulses
It's
various
full.
frequencies.
Those are
through
hollow
here.
tubes?
Full.
No, this is all solid carbon fiber.
Oh, it was like lock.
Yeah, certainly, we
Pasted
could-
onto
we
the
could-
side.
That'd be a
could
good, just a
certainly-
good
Is it
little
hard,
project to do.
piloting something like this?
This one's very easy to fly because there's only two things to
Release me
do.
from the computer.
But if you listen, it's actually in the audible frequency. Oops.
So are you also on the AUVSI team?
No.
No.
There's a meeting tonight. I think I'll go to. Yeah, it's pretty cool. They do a lot of similar. I worked a lot with Pixbox, and they use that. A lot of like the open software.
Right.
So.
Yeah. The propeller's been out of balance for forever. That's part of why the battery can come off. So you can see it's
Yeah, you
just like
can see the
sitting there
wobble.
oscillating.
Vibration.
Where's
Probably
the
needs a new
battery?
bearing.
The battery is magnetically attached right here.
Oh, that's
It's this thing.
Oh.
20 milliamp hours.
That's impressive.
It's like 1/100th of the capacity of something in your smartphone.
Right.
Less than that even. But, yeah, it's fun to